When I first started working at Ground Up Cafe, it felt like a dream gig. The place had that cozy, industrial chic vibe, exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs, indie music humming softly in the background. I was 22, wearing a green apron 2 sizes too big and living almost entirely on caffeine and optimism. At first, the worst thing about the job was dealing with customers who thought, extra hot, extra whip, half CAF, oat milk latte, was a personality trait. But otherwise, it was manageable. The staff was a scrappy, friendly bunch. The tips were decent. Management seemed, well, quirky but harmless. Until I noticed something strange. Every few weeks, our manager, Chad, his real name, would pull someone aside with a sheepish grin and say, "Hey, there was a little cash discrepancy today. Nothing major. Company policy says we split shortages just until the drawer balances out." At first it was $5 here, $10 there. We all kind of shrugged and paid up from our tips. Mistakes happen, right? Maybe someone gave back the wrong change or miscounted a 20. But then it became a pattern. And it started to hurt. One Saturday night, after a packed shift that felt like running a marathon inside a sauna, Chad came over, clipboard in hand, and gave me that same lazy smile. "Bad news, kiddo. We're $200 short. Gonna need you to cover it. Company policy." I laughed. Like, actual laughed. Surely he was joking. But Chad wasn't the joking type. Not when it came to money. $200? I repeated, staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "Yeah. You were on register for most of the night, so it falls to you. You get it, right?" My chest tightened. I only made about $11 an hour plus tips, and tonight's tips barely scraped $50. I couldn't afford to cough up $200 just like that. But Chad stood there, arms crossed, waiting. If I didn't pay, he hinted, I might find my next few shifts mysteriously drop from the schedule. I paid. Not because I believed it was my fault, but because I was terrified of losing my job. Driving home that night, knuckles white on the steering wheel, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make sure Chad remembered the day he tried to squeeze me dry. After that night, something inside me snapped. The kind of snap you don't hear at first, the slow, splintering kind, like a crack forming across glass. I didn't tell anyone about the $200 at first. Not my friends, not even my coworkers. It felt embarrassing, like I'd let myself be conned. But once you see the crack, you start noticing all the other fractures too. The next few weeks I watched closely. Chad was hitting up everyone. Always with the same excuses. A customer disputed their change and we had to comp them. The drawer's light and I need everyone to chip in to avoid corporate breathing down my neck. It's just temporary. You'll get it back eventually. Eventually never came. One of the newer baristas, Emily, caught my eye one night after closing. She was stuffing dollar bills from her apron into a jar behind the counter, face red with frustration. "You too?" I asked quietly. She blinked, startled, then nodded, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He made me pay $70 last week. Said if I didn't, I'd get written up." That was the final confirmation I needed. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't bad luck. It was a system. Chad was running a little empire funded by scared, broke baristas. I started digging. Every shortage was logged in a dusty ledger Chad kept behind the counter. At first glance it seemed official enough. But a closer look revealed patterns. Shortages only appeared after heavy tip nights. Always vague, always blamed on someone who couldn't afford to argue. I began snapping photos of the pages with my phone during shifts. Then I got braver. I started keeping every receipt. Every payout log. I even convinced Emily and another coworker, Marco, to write statements describing their experiences. No drama. No angry rants. Just facts. Piece by piece, I built a quiet, devastating dossier. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Every time Chad slapped me on the back and joked about my team player attitude, I had to smile like I wasn't fantasizing about stapling that smug ledger straight to his forehead. Patience, I told myself. Justice needs patience. And when the time came, I wasn't going to make a single scene. I was going to bury him in paper. About a month into my quiet little evidence-gathering mission, an opportunity practically dropped into my lap. One slow Tuesday morning, the cafe's owner, Mr. Kingston, a man I had only seen twice before, always in pressed slacks and smelling faintly of expensive cologne, walked in unexpectedly. Everyone froze. Chad scrambled out from the back, wiping invisible dust off the counters like he hadn't just been playing Candy Crush in the office. Just a random check-in, Mr. Kingston said casually, strolling around like he owned the place. Which he did. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the espresso machine hissing behind me. This was it. This was my chance. Later, while Chad was distracted showing Mr. Kingston the freshly cleaned restrooms, yes, really, I scribbled a quick note and slipped it into Mr. Kingston's hand as he passed by the register. It read simply, "Please check recent cash shortages and employee payouts. Serious concerns. Evidence available. Confidential." He gave me a brief, sharp look. No nod. No acknowledgement. Just tucked the note into his pocket like it was a receipt and kept moving. The rest of my shift dragged like cold molasses. Had I just signed my own pink slip? Was Mr. Kingston just going to hand the note to Chad and tell him to deal with the troublemaker? The doubts gnawed at me all night. But 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Alan Kingston. Please email all documentation to this address. Confidential. Thank you." I reread it 5 times to be sure. Then I got to work. I put everything into a neat, painfully detailed PDF. Photos of the ledger pages. Employee testimonies. Screenshots of text messages from Chad asking for payouts. Copies of our schedules and tip logs. No angry rants. No emotional appeals. Just cold, heavy proof. When I clicked send, I actually sat back in my chair and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for a month straight. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the victim anymore. The weirdest part? Nothing happened. For almost 2 whole weeks after I sent that email, it was business as usual at Ground Up Cafe. Chad kept swaggering around like he owned the place, barking orders, collecting shortage payments from anyone too scared to fight back. I served lattes with a smile that felt more and more like a loaded weapon. Was Mr. Kingston blowing me off? Was Chad too slippery to catch? I started second-guessing myself hard. Then one Friday afternoon, one of those humid days where the AC felt more like a weak sigh, Chad called a mandatory team meeting after close. His face was oddly pale. His usually cocky voice tight, almost strained. "We're making some staffing changes starting next week," he announced, avoiding eye contact. Management decided it was time to shake things up a bit. Emily and I exchanged a glance over the espresso machine. That was not Chad's usual cocky tone. The next morning, I came in for my shift and found a sign taped to the inside of the office door. "Manager on leave until further notice. Interim management will be assisting." No Chad. No warning. No goodbyes. Just gone. At the same moment, Mr. Kingston walked in through the front doors, not with his usual relaxed air but sharp, direct. He called a private meeting with me, Emily, and Marco in the back office. He sat us down, no nonsense, sleeves rolled up. "I want to thank you," he said simply. "The information you provided helped us uncover significant misconduct. I've already processed reimbursement for all money taken improperly. Expect it to hit your accounts by Monday." I blinked. Emily actually gasped. "And Chad?" Marco asked quietly. Mr. Kingston smiled, a thin, satisfied smile that told me everything I needed to know. "Let's just say he's no longer part of the Ground Up family," he said. "And he won't be eligible for rehire anywhere else in the company." It was so clean. So professional. So devastatingly final. By the time I walked back out to the cafe floor, the whole place felt lighter. Like someone had opened a window after years of stale air. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, humming under my breath. The crack across the glass had finally shattered. But it wasn't chaos. It was freedom. The next few days at Ground Up Cafe felt like living in a totally different universe. No more shifty glances when Chad passed by. No more nervous shuffling of tips into secret jars. Just peace. Actual, unbothered, caffeine-fueled peace. Emily started cracking jokes during shifts again. Marco stopped flinching every time the register beeped. Even the regular customers noticed. "Feels like y'all are happier lately," one lady commented as I handed her a cappuccino. "Must be the fresh beans," I said with a smile, tapping the side of my nose. By Monday morning, just like Mr. Kingston promised, the money I'd lost, every penny Chad had squeezed out of me, was sitting in my bank account. It wasn't a fortune, but it felt like a mountain. Not just because of the cash, but because of what it meant. Proof that standing up for yourself, quietly and steadily, had actually worked. I figured that was the end of it. Get my money back. Keep working. Maybe save up enough to quit and do something bigger. But life had one more surprise tucked up its sleeve. About a month later, I was in the middle of stocking syrups when Mr. Kingston walked in again, this time carrying a leather folder and looking suspiciously cheerful. He asked to speak with me in the office. Again. Inside, he sat across from me, elbows on the table, that faint smell of cologne still clinging to the air. "You've shown a lot of integrity over the last few months," he started. "And some real leadership qualities." I just nodded, still half expecting him to say, "And that's why we're firing you for being too smart." Instead, he slid the leather folder across the table. Inside, an offer letter. Full-time manager. Significantly better salary. Benefits. Paid vacation. I stared at the paper like it might burst into flames. "You want me to manage the cafe?" I asked slowly. He chuckled. "You've already proven you care more about this place and the people in it than some folks who had manager on their name tags for years. I'd rather have someone loyal and smart than someone flashy and reckless." I must have looked like a fish gasping for air because he added, kindly, "Think about it." No rush. But I didn't need to think about it. I signed the letter that afternoon. They thought I would just leave. Instead, I stayed. I rebuilt. I won. Taking the manager job felt like leveling up in a game I hadn't even realized I was playing. One week I was pulling espresso shots and dodging corporate politics. The next, I had a key to the building, a company email address, and a whole new set of headaches. Managing a cafe wasn't just about keeping the coffee flowing and the pastry case full. It was staffing schedules, balancing supply orders, dealing with customers who thought medium-rare almond milk was a valid request. It was 100 tiny fires a day and exactly 0 instruction manuals. My first full week, I spent more time in the office than on the floor. Learning the back-end systems. Filling out reports Chad had probably forged for months. Taking inventory that hadn't been accurately counted since, like, the Bush administration. There were moments I wondered if I was in over my head. Okay, full honesty? There were moments I straight up Googled how to manage a coffee shop without dying. But every time I felt that old knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach, I reminded myself, you earned this. Not because someone handed it to me out of pity. Not because I played dirty. Because when the moment came, I had the receipts, literally and figuratively, and I stood my ground. And something wild started to happen. The staff backed me. Not out of fear like they had with Chad. Out of respect. Emily picked up extra shifts without being asked. Marco started running the morning setups with actual efficiency. Even the new hires, fresh-faced teenagers who still thought latte art was a personality, listened when I trained them. The vibe shifted. Ground Up Cafe wasn't just a place to clock in anymore. It started to feel like ours. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a crazy lunch rush, Emily handed me a cold brew and grinned. "You're the best boss we've ever had," she said. I laughed it off at the time, making some sarcastic crack about low standards, but inside, it hit hard. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. And it felt good. Really good. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the biggest drama was whether to brew another pot of decaf, when Emily came barreling into the back office, eyes wide. "You are not going to believe what I just heard," she said, practically vibrating with gossip energy. I set down the schedule I was working on. "Please," I said. "Give me a reason to procrastinate." She leaned against the doorframe, lowering her voice even though nobody was around. "Chad's working at the smoothie shack across town." I blinked. "You mean the place that hires teenagers to blend protein powder for minimum wage?" "Yup," Emily said, savoring it like the last bite of a good brownie. "Apparently he's an assistant shift lead, which is a fancy way of saying guy who cleans the blenders." I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not a mean, mocking laugh. Just sheer disbelief. Chad, who used to strut around like he was the CEO of caffeine, now wiping down sticky counters at a smoothie bar that smelled like regret and old bananas. Karma didn't always come served hot. Sometimes it was blended with whey protein and a side of humble pie. Other rumors trickled in over the next few weeks. Marco's girlfriend, who worked at the bookstore next to Smoothie Shack, confirmed Chad's fall from grace. He wasn't just demoted in status, he was miserable. Griping about corporate backstabbers and fake employees to anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, here at Ground Up, business was booming. Mr. Kingston even mentioned plans to expand, maybe a second location, and hinted that he'd want me involved in setting it up when the time came. I wasn't petty enough to revel in Chad's downfall. Not entirely anyway. But I was human enough to feel a tiny, sharp sense of satisfaction. He had tried to crush people beneath him. He had assumed we'd all be too scared, too small, too dependent. Instead, we rose. We rebuilt. And he blended smoothies for soccer moms asking if the acai was organic. Poetic, really. About 3 months after Chad's not-so-glorious exit, Mr. Kingston called me in for another meeting. Not gonna lie, every time he said, "We need to chat," a small part of me still braced for disaster, trauma reflex from surviving Chad, probably. But this time the vibe was different. He sat across from me at the same battered office table, wearing that faint smile he only busted out for serious good news. "We're opening a second location," he said. "Downtown. Big spot. High foot traffic. A real opportunity." I nodded, heart thudding a little faster. That was huge. Downtown wasn't just random walk-ins. It was corporate accounts, catering, big spenders grabbing triple-shot espressos between board meetings. "And I want you to help run it," he added. I blinked. "Like, transfer me there?" "Not just transfer," Mr. Kingston said, tapping a folder between us. "We're creating a regional manager position. Oversee both cafes. Hiring, training, inventory, everything." I sat back stunned. Regional manager. That was a career move. A real salary. Benefits that didn't expire if you worked less than 40 hours one week. A path. A future. It felt almost unreal. "I'd need someone full-time," he said. "Someone I can trust to uphold the standards you've already set." He said it so casually, like he wasn't handing me the exact kind of validation I used to dream about while scrubbing coffee stains out of my apron at midnight. I didn't even need to think about it. "I'm in," I said, grinning so wide it hurt. And just like that, the kid who used to stuff her entire paycheck into rent and instant ramen was now in charge of multiple locations, building the kind of career I'd once thought was reserved for people with perfect resumes and fancy degrees. Not bad for someone Chad thought he could intimidate out the door with a $200 shakedown. Not bad at all. The grand opening of the downtown location was a blur of coffee orders, balloon arches, and corporate handshakes. I wore my best blazer, the one that made me feel like I could walk into any room and own it, and smiled through the chaos as we served our first 100 customers before noon. Mr. Kingston gave a little speech about new beginnings and investing in people who invest in us, and I caught more than one employee glancing at me and grinning. They knew. They all knew. Later that afternoon, I stood in the center of the shiny new cafe, breathing in the smell of fresh paint and espresso, and realized something. There would be no big announcement about what I had survived. No parade for how I outmaneuvered Chad. No dramatic movie moment where he burst through the door begging for forgiveness. There was just this quiet success. Earned, not handed. And honestly, it was better this way. Revenge wasn't a screaming match or a viral Facebook post. Revenge was being the one still standing when all the dust had settled. It was seeing people choose you, your leadership, your work ethic, because they trusted you. It was helping new employees grow, not by scaring them, but by showing them they were part of something real. It was looking at the bank account that once held nothing but overdraft fees, and seeing stability. It was buying my first used but solid car with my own money, no cosigner needed. It was calling my mom one night and saying I'm doing really good and meaning it. It was becoming the person I'd always quietly hoped I could be. No apology from Chad could have topped that. No public humiliation could have been sweeter than knowing, deep down, that I'd turned his betrayal into my own damn empire. All without ever raising my voice. All without ever losing who I was. Looking back now, it's almost funny how small that $200 felt in the grand scheme of things. At the time, it felt huge, like the world was collapsing in slow motion. Like a single moment of injustice could somehow undo all the late nights, the loyalty, the tiny victories that no one else saw. But it didn't. Because that $200 wasn't just a theft of money. It was a theft of trust. And once trust cracks, you can't just patch it up with an apology or, hey, it's just business. You have to rebuild or walk away and build something better. I chose to build. Piece by piece, quietly, while everyone expected me to give up and disappear. While they thought I would just leave. Instead, I stayed. I documented. I planned. And when the moment came, I didn't rage or burn bridges. I sent a calm email. I handed over the truth. And the truth did exactly what it was supposed to do. It cleared the rot. It made space for something healthier to grow. It gave me back my dignity without costing me my soul. What I learned is this. You don't always have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you fight fire with receipts, patience, and a quiet refusal to be small. Sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't a battle. It's becoming undeniable. And when you become undeniable, the people who tried to bury you, they realized too late that they were watering a seed that grew into something far bigger than they ever imagined.